you see lots of companies come to India and fail. Why? Because they haven't been able to understand what the local consumer wants. The companies who have been successful, the multinationals who have been successful, what they've done is they've come in and they've designed and they've tailored everything for the Indian consumer because they realize the value of the market as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Pioneers Pathway podcast, joined as always by your two favorite co-hosts, me, Shaurya, and my good friend, Mr. Liam Villani. How are you, Liam?
I'm doing really well. It's really cool actually because we're finally in the same time zone, right?
No, absolutely. It seems you've decided to join me.
I've decided to join you, and what a start to my 2 months in India, right? It's amazing to be here, and we're actually going to be talking about India. That's our topic for today, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, obviously, as we all know, India is a very exciting economy. It's, in the top 5 in the world in terms of GDP, isn't it?
It is. India is. It's. There's so much to talk about it because just look at the scale, right? Size, land mass, but most importantly, population. It's huge, and there's just so many people here. And it's really interesting, right? Because I only realized that yesterday that it's a really young country, right? Like it's not even been around for more than 100 years, right? It's a young country, and it's still at its developmental stage, right? And that's exciting, right?
Yeah, no, of course, and obviously when you have the younger population who are better inclined with technology, they're going to have more innovative ideas, more technologically advanced ideas than perhaps say another economy, isn't it?
It is. It's a country where, there's so much promise, and I think everyone knows where India is going to turn out in 50 years, but it's just being able to get to that stage, right? Everyone knows in 50 years it'll be like the West, right? That's sort of the developmental process, but we're talking about a country which the UK isn't even the size of some of the smallest states in India, right? The population is huge, and when those challenges, those things mean that you can't really replicate what's happened in America, in the UK, in Europe, over here. You have to bring something new to the table.
Yeah, no, of course, and obviously within the country, you've essentially got the 3 major sort of cities you've got are Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and there seem to be sort of 3 different things going on at the same time. You sort of have these 3 different cities having their own sort of major roles in different ways.
Yeah, I'd say it's interesting, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You'll know a bit more about this, but you can kind of split them up into the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities, right? Tier 1 has always been New Delhi, which I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong again, it's where the government is based. Most of the administries, the government, the political side of things tends to happen in New Delhi. The embassies, the international organizations, those things. Mumbai is the financial industries, sort of very big in tourism, but mainly the financial industries. And Bangalore, which Bangalore is where I am, but Bangalore, it's a mix of it all. It's IT. IT is undoubtedly a huge thing here, but you're having a lot of multinationals who are choosing to headquarter here, even if they're not involved in IT. I've seen, do you know Stellantis, the big automobile company? They've got base here. All the pharmaceutical companies are here as well, right? So it's sort of where multinationals come when they want to enjoy the India growth story, the cheap labor, but also so much more business differentiation over here.
No, absolutely. I mean, especially with the case of Bangalore. I mean, I would say in a way it's sort of India's reply to Silicon Valley. You have a lot of the startups being, developed there, and alongside you've got a lot of VCs setting up offices in Bangalore because that's where they feel they can interact well with, the startups, and they're sort of creating their own sort of ecosystem over there.
It is. It is. It's an ecosystem which is it's a very much Indian ecosystem. You can't. It's maybe the India's Silicon Valley, but it's nowhere near an exact replica. They're doing it in their own way. There's obviously a big difference. Is that everyone knows labor is cheap in India. There was just a bigger population over here, and so those are sort of the real benefits I think companies are trying to accrue from. And it's really interesting actually when you're looking at the infrastructure as well around these cities. At the airport growth in the last like couple of years has been enormous, and metro stations, the roads, that it's amazing how much has progressed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we covered, the whole idea of an airport sort of being your entry into the main sort of economic environment, some time back. But essentially, like you've mentioned, the importance of airports, you want to show that you're welcome for business, right? If you obviously have a more sophisticated airport, it encourages more tourists to come as well, it encourages more business, it has that effect. Alongside that with the infrastructure, you want to have it as, tourist friendly, as business friendly as possible, because that's the way you're going to grow in this economy.
Exactly, exactly. It's fascinating to see how many direct flights to non Mumbai, the outside of Mumbai and New Delhi, how many new direct flights to other cities in India from just the UK, for example. It's crazy how many flights are going to the south of India, to the north of India. You know, Mumbai and Delhi have always been sort of very big destinations, but airlines are opening up big routes. Even British Airways, the national carriers in the West, are opening up direct routes to some of the emerging cities in India. There's a growth in that, and I think a lot of that is business travel. A lot of that is business travel. Obviously, tourism and family play a part, but a lot of it is business travel. But I'm curious to see sort of where do you see the India the trends going forward in like say the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think is the big things which are happening and changing in India?
Well, no, absolutely. So if we could take a look at it in various different sectors, for example. So now, obviously, the average Indian consumer, I would argue, is a lot more health conscious. So in the FMCG space, we're sort of having a lot more startups opening up, and they're providing their own sort of take on traditional products, making it a lot more sustainable, a lot more healthy. So that's what I'm noticing in terms of the traditional sort of food FMCG side of things. And I guess we're seeing fintech evolve as well, right? You're seeing new companies open up. Now, not necessarily in the last 5 years, a bit longer than that, say around 10. We obviously had the implementation of the UPI payment system, something that you've actually found quite interesting as well, coming from Spain, isn't it? So essentially, the point being is that we're seeing all these, different sectors being opened up, and the traditional sectors that were always there, they're seeing a lot of change as well as the consumer, taste change, their knowledge change.
Yeah, it's really consumer driven, right? Consumer driven behavior. The consumers are getting richer. The salaries are going up, and people are getting into to better jobs, which means that they want to sort of get in line with what middle class outside of India are spending and doing, right? Travel. A lot more people are traveling. A lot more people are spending on things outside of maybe medical stuff and education, right? They're going out shopping. They're buying things, and that's just going to drive up the demand. And so you need those raw materials. You need the staffing. You need all of those that ecosystem, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you mentioned, when the average Indian tourist goes abroad, he might see, a chain that he likes over there. He might, go to the US. He might go to the Starbucks. And now all of a sudden, because of that, you're seeing a lot more people going to the US. They want to bring the same taste back. That's why you have these sort of, coffee shops opening up in India as well. You sort of have the Indian take. Obviously, India is known for being a tea loving nation. So you have tea chains opening up as well, rather than your traditional stall being on the roadside corner. So there's, all these different takes on Western culture being implemented and the Western culture itself being brought here. But even though when they do come here, they obviously have to implement some changes in terms of taste to ensure it's in line with what the customer wants, right? You see lots of companies come to India and fail. Why? Because they haven't been able to understand what the local consumer wants. The companies who have been successful, the multinationals who have been successful, what they've done is they've come in and they've designed and they've tailored everything for the Indian consumer because they realize the value of the market as well.
Here's a hypothetical question. We're both. You obviously live in India. I'm from Indian origin, so there's a link there. But say there was someone who was new to India, right, completely new to India, but was into business and wanted to be part of the India growth story, India in the Indian business landscape. They were going to come and relocate to India. What do you think they should be looking for in terms of business opportunities? How do you think they could benefit and also contribute to the India growth story?
No, absolutely. I think it's a pretty interesting question you've asked there because there's no right answer. But the main thing is you have to account for what, there's a huge amount of competition in India. That's one thing you have to bear in mind, right? So wherever you're bringing, the main emphasis has to be on the actual service and the quality of the product, right? Now, obviously, because there's so much choice available, you have to be able to stand out in that regard. Right? It's not, okay for you to bring whatever you have in your native country and expect it to work. Right? It won't work in any other country. It might not work everywhere. It might work in some places, it might not work everywhere. Right? But in India especially, the main emphasis is ensuring whatever you bring, the quality is to the top. Right? Because people have the money. They're willing to spend it these days. That wasn't the case, I'd argue, maybe 10, 15 years ago. But now, because there's more disposable income, more people are willing to spend that money. So the main thing is, if you are making them spend that money, the quality also has to match it, right? And it also has to be to their taste. So whatever, sector you're looking to go into, that's the main thing you have to take into account. You see all the big companies doing it, right? Amazon has done it, right? What they did is they tailor-made the app for the Indian market, right? So the app you see in India and the app you see in, say, the UK or the US is different. It's been tailor-made. It's been, adjusted accordingly. How will the Indian customer respond to certain things? Slightly different UI design, all these different things have to be, implemented.
I was just gonna come back to that. Thinking a bit more into the supply chains and raw materials, things like that. Do you think India, this growing consumerism, this growing the growth happening in India? Do you think supply chains, the resources you've got that's in the country, do you think that can keep up? Because obviously, yeah, India is a big country, but whether they're able to exploit those resources correctly is questionable as well, right?
No, absolutely. But what you'll notice is in a lot of things, India does have the raw materials, right? In terms of agriculture, there's a huge agriculture sector, right? And what you tend to notice is you sort of have products that are designed for the Indian market and you have products that are designed to be exported. So now India already has that sort of system in place, for example. And like I mentioned, there is a huge amount of raw materials. So as the population increases, there might be a stage where, okay, there might be a lot more pressure on the raw materials. But at least, for the next 5-10 years, I don't expect there to be a huge major issue. What about you? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
So I think the opportunity lies in the raw materials, the natural resources, and that's in people, right? Because obviously India's outsourcing giant, but also the physical raw materials. And what you're finding, I feel when looking at in the West and the global system in general, prices are going up because the resources are there's less and less. But where India comes from is sort of it's got those resources, but the consumers are also making a lot of resources, right? There's a lot of waste and there's a lot of things like that. Surely there are benefits that can be accrued from that. But also just looking at sort of the landmass, right? It's huge, right? That together with very cheap labor surely can make something that's of value for places outside of India.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, for example, what you notice in chemicals as well. Chemicals, a lot of them tend to be exported as well. A lot is used for domestic use, but a lot of it is exported as well. And obviously, what you'll notice is as the population grows, the demand will also grow. So, I'm quite interested to see how that balance will sort of change. Will we sort of, prioritize our own, customer group, or will we, look to export more?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's crucial. Export, import. What's the focus? Obviously, you've got there are the big companies, the Reliance, the Adani, who've taken over a lot of the industries. But I think there are opportunities for newer industries to come and sort of break up that market, and newer companies, sorry, to break up those industries and break up that monopolistic kind of power that others have. Even looking at things sort of like solar electrical generators generating energy and those things. I think there are those opportunities there, but it's just whether India is open to people coming in. You look at a country like the UK, international inward investment is huge. India still has those restrictions in place. It's not as open as I would say the West are, but I think it's gradually it will open up. But is that fast enough to really be able to benefit from that in terms of outsider investment? I don't know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think he'll be a lot more on a sector by sector basis as well. So, for example, in automotive, right, we obviously have in India, you have your own sort of manufacturers, and generally it's more of a two-wheeler based market. Now, obviously, you have foreign companies who have their own, EV two-wheelers. But in India, you're getting a huge sort of variety, right? More and more companies are starting to engage in this. Obviously you have Ather Energy, you have Ola Electric, you have Mahindra. So these three, they're obviously working on their own sort of two-wheeler electric vehicles. Now, that's one example where I don't think that we'll see something in terms of the two-wheeler market. Potentially in the four-wheeler market, Tesla, they want to try and crack the Indian market. So that'll be interesting to see. And I want to see how receptive the Indian government plans to be to that.
Yeah.
And whether, they feel the infrastructure is in place for that. Because right now, in terms of automotive at least, it's still quite, heavily based on your traditional petrol and diesel vehicles. Obviously, you are seeing EVs come into play, but they tend to be more of the local ones, the local
Yeah.
brands.
The
So,
Tata Motors,
Tata Mahindra. I'm not sure
Mahindra.
how it'll be when Tesla comes into play.
Yeah, yeah. True. Very, very true. No, really interesting stuff. I think a lot more people are open to the fact of coming and exploiting or exploiting. It's not exploiting is not the right word. Being a part of those opportunities that India is about, and really trying to build bridges there. And I think it's really interesting. And like they always say, the in Britain, in Europe, the real wealth creation happened in maybe our parents' generation, in maybe the 40s to the 70s. That's where the real wealth generation happened. Now the opportunity isn't there. But if you look in the Middle East, Asia, India in particular, that's where you can really drive wealth generation and you can really build things. And I think that's where the opportunity lies.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like a cycle, isn't it? The opportunities dry up in one place. They realize they have to make certain changes, certain policies come into play. Suddenly, there's new opportunities there, right? The opportunities move. It's kind of like a cycle. At the minute, the opportunities are in India, China, all these sort of developing countries. So obviously, everyone would. I'm sure many people would like to come, join the journey, try and get some wealth out of it. And I'm sure many people will, be successful in doing so.
So
But it's also
I was just gonna say. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say. Here's a bit of a thought experiment. Maybe we can end on this thought experiment. Hypothetically, you were coming to India, right? You forget that you I know you live here and everything. Hypothetically, you had the opportunity to come to India. You had $50,000 in the bank. What would you do? Yeah. What would you do? Maybe you start. Maybe the option is to either start a factory, or start a startup, or start some other organization. If you had all of those three options, what would you do?
Well, I'll be honest, right? It might sound like a bit of a boring answer, right? And I'll be very honest. So if I had 50,000, I was coming to India to start a business, I would spend a lot of it on market research,
Okay.
right? And that's something that you notice a lot of the companies do. That's the only way you're going to crack the market. So first of all, I'd spend, a lot of time on market research. And after my market research, whatever sector I plan to go into, right? You have to be able to understand the taste. Once I've gauged the taste, I've seen what's going on in the market currently. There's bound to be some inefficiencies going on, wherever it is. And then I would seek to exploit it. Because end of the day, there's two ways of solving a problem. You either throw money at it or you throw time at it. Now, some companies are so big that they don't really want to throw time at it. They're willing to throw money at it, and they are able to throw money at it. So I would look and see where that can be implemented, right? So if you see a big company, you could work alongside them, have your own startup, be a consultant to them, and see how they can reduce their, inefficiencies and become more efficient. Because at the end of the day, in India, a lot of people focus on the P&L, right? You have to maximize your P&L whilst not compromising your quality, whilst ensuring everything is in line with the consumer taste. And that's a very challenging thing to do. But if you're able to help, someone achieve that, that's when you can do really well.
Yeah, exactly. No, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. I think we were going to talk about it this week about the airline industry, but maybe we can leave that to the next one. It's sort of the India airline industry, tourism, infrastructure, and things like that. Because I think that there's a lot we can talk about that, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
So
Especially, with a growing, sort of tourism market. It could be, a whole episode in itself, can't it?
yeah, so let's do that. Next week, let's delegate to that, and then obviously, if anyone else has anything that they want to talk about, discuss, let us know, and then we can always chat about that. If there's any Indian startup founders or people in India who want to comment or come on to have a chat about things over here, please do as well. It'll be great to speak to you as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as always, you know where to find us. Our email is always in the description. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. Share your thoughts, whether you absolutely love us or, absolutely despise us. So yeah, no, absolutely. Do feel free to reach out to us. Give us any, sort of topic ideas you might have or anything you want.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.